The dust-laden wind whipped across the sun-baked platform as Tabitha Fletcher clutched her single suitcase, squinting against the harsh afternoon light of Apache Junction, Arizona Territory, 1885. The train that had carried her 1,000 miles from St. Louis had belched its final cloud of smoke and departed, leaving her alone at the edge of a town that seemed more mirage than reality. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she faced what lay ahead, a marriage to a man she'd never met, whose letters she'd had to have read to her by the kindly neighbor woman back home. Quinn Buchanan ran calloused fingers through his sandy hair as he scanned the depleted crowd of passengers. Most had been greeted already, embraced by waiting family or whisked away by business associates. Only one remained, a slender woman in a faded blue traveling dress, her posture suggesting both determination and terror. His mail-order bride had arrived, Miss Fletcher. He called, approaching with measured steps, not wanting to startle her. She turned toward his voice, relief washing over her features. "Mr. Buchanan," Quinn nodded, removing his hat. "Welcome to Apache Junction." He was struck by her beauty, not the painted, polished kind he occasionally glimpsed in town, but something genuine. Her chestnut hair was simply pinned, her complexion sun-kissed, with a dusting of freckles across her nose. But it was her eyes that caught him, deep amber flecked with gold, expressive and wary. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." Tabitha hesitated, uncertain how to respond. The journey had been terrifying, navigating train schedules, transfers, and connections with nothing but memorized instructions and the kindness of strangers. She'd spent the entire trip in constant fear of boarding the wrong train or missing her stop. "It was manageable," she finally said. Quinn gestured toward her suitcase. "Is this all you've brought?" She nodded, clutching it tighter. "Everything I need." He reached for it, careful not to touch her hand. "My wagon's just over yonder. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." As they walked, Quinn noticed her cautious steps, the way her eyes darted around the dusty street, taking in the saloon, general store, and scattered buildings that comprised Apache Junction. She seemed both fascinated and overwhelmed. "It ain't St. Louis," he said, helping her into the wagon. "But it's home." "It's exactly as I imagined," Tabitha replied, though in truth, nothing could have prepared her for the vastness of the landscape, the mountains rising in the distance, the endless sky stretching above them. The ride to the ranch passed in awkward silence, broken only by Quinn's occasional comments about landmarks or bits of local history. Tabitha responded with nods or brief acknowledgments, her mind churning with anxiety over the moment she knew must come. Quinn's ranch appeared as they crested a gentle hill, a modest but well-built house, a large barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. A creek wound through the property, feeding a stand of cottonwood trees whose leaves shimmered in the late afternoon light. "It ain't much," Quinn said, suddenly self-conscious, "but the land's good. Got 60 head of cattle, some horses. The house needs a woman's touch, I reckon, but it's solid." "It's beautiful," Tabitha said honestly, relieved to see evidence of prosperity and care. Her father's death had left her penniless, with no choice but to accept one of the marriage proposals that had come in response to her advertisement. Quinn's letters had been simple but kind, his offer practical but not unkind. He helped her down from the wagon, her small hand disappearing in his large one. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through them both. "I'll show you around," he offered, leading her toward the house. Inside was clean but sparse functional furniture, bare walls, minimal comforts. The kitchen was well equipped, the pantry stocked. Upstairs, Quinn showed her to a bedroom with a freshly made bed. "This'll be yours," he said. "Mine's across the hall, I figured." Well, we should get to know each other before. He cleared his throat. There's no rush on that account. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Supper in an hour. Nothing fancy, just beans and bread, maybe some preserves Mrs. Holloway from town brought over. Tabitha nodded, grateful for the chance to compose herself. As soon as Quinn left, she sank onto the bed, trembling. The moment of truth could no longer be postponed. When he returned, she would have to tell him. Supper was a quiet affair, with Quinn making hesitant attempts at conversation and Tabitha responding politely but briefly. She watched him carefully, this man who was now her husband in name, if not yet in fact. His hands were strong but gentle, his face weathered by sun and wind. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, but his features were striking: a straight nose, square jaw softened by the hint of a beard, and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. When they'd finished eating, Quinn pulled several letters from his pocket, her letters, or rather, the ones she dictated to Mrs. Greenwood back in St. Louis. "I've read these so many times," he admitted. "You have a way with words, Miss Fletcher." "Tabitha," he corrected himself. The moment had come. Tabitha took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. "Mr. Buchanan, Quinn," he interrupted gently. "Quinn," she repeated, the name foreign on her tongue. "I need to tell you something important, something I couldn't explain in those letters." He waited, his expression open but guarded. "Those letters. I didn't write them myself. I told Mrs. Greenwood what to say, and she wrote them for me." Tabitha swallowed hard. "The truth is, I can't read or write. I'm illiterate." The silence that followed seemed endless. Tabitha stared at her plate, unable to meet his gaze, waiting for the anger, the accusations of deception, perhaps even a demand that she return east on the next train. Instead, Quinn's voice came soft and steady. "Then I'll write our story for both of us." She looked up, disbelieving. "You're not angry," he shook his head slowly. "Disappointed, maybe, that you felt you couldn't tell me, but angry? No. There's all kinds of knowledge in this world, Tabitha. Being able to read fancy books ain't the only kind worth having. But I lied to you. You omitted something you were afraid would make me reject you," he corrected. "And I reckon you had good reason to be scared, given how some folks judge such things." Tears pricked at her eyes. "My father believed education was wasted on girls. When my mother tried to teach me, he'd burn the books. After she died, there was no one left to try." Quinn's jaw tightened at this revelation, but his voice remained gentle. "Well, there's someone to try now if you've a mind to learn. You teach me. I ain't no schoolmaster, but I know my letters well enough. And until then," he gestured to the papers, "I meant what I said. I'll write for both of us." That night, as Tabitha lay in her new bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night, she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Perhaps this marriage of convenience, this desperate gamble, might become something more. The following weeks established a routine. Quinn rose before dawn, tending to the cattle and horses while Tabitha learned the rhythms of the ranch house. She proved adept in the kitchen, turning simple provisions into satisfying meals. Her needle skills transformed worn curtains and patched Quinn's clothes. Each evening after supper, Quinn would bring out a primer he'd purchased in town. Patient and encouraging, he guided her through the alphabet, never showing frustration when she struggled to distinguish similar letters or forgot ones they'd covered the previous night. "My father was wrong about so many things," she confided one evening as they sat at the kitchen table, the lamp casting a warm glow over their lesson. "But I believed him when he said I was too stupid to learn." Quinn's hand covered hers, rough calluses against her soft skin. "Your father was a fool, Tabitha. You're one of the smartest women I've ever known." "How can you say that? I can barely write my own name after 3 weeks of lessons." "Because intelligence ain't just about book learning. I've watched you calculate egg money faster than I can, memorize recipes after hearing them once, and figure out which herbs help with which ailments. That's intelligence too." His words warmed her more than any fire could. Slowly, tentatively, Tabitha and Quinn were building something between them, not yet love, perhaps, but a foundation of respect and growing affection. One afternoon, as Tabitha hung laundry in the yard, a cloud of dust on the horizon announced visitors. Her heart raced. She'd met few of Quinn's neighbors and was always anxious about these encounters, fearing her lack of education would somehow be exposed. A wagon appeared, driven by a tall man with a silver-streaked beard. Beside him sat a plump woman with kind eyes and a young girl of about 12. "The Parkers," Quinn explained, coming from the barn. "Nathan, Martha, and their daughter Lily. Good folks." Martha Parker embraced Tabitha warmly. "We've been dying to meet Quinn's bride." When he told us he'd sent away for one, we thought he'd finally lost his mind, but now I see he knew exactly what he was doing. Tabitha blushed. "It's lovely to meet you. We brought pie," Martha announced, producing a covered dish. "And Lily's brought something special for you, too." The girl stepped forward shyly, offering a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, madam, but Pa said you might like it." Tabitha unwrapped it carefully to reveal a hand-bound book. Opening it, she found blank pages. "Quinn mentioned you like stories," Nathan explained. "Thought you might want to write down your journey west and all." Panic fluttered in Tabitha's chest as she looked to Quinn, who smoothly intervened. "That's mighty thoughtful. Tabitha's been telling me she wants to keep a record of our days here. Ain't that right, darling?" She nodded gratefully. "Yes, thank you, it's perfect." Later, after their guests had departed, Tabitha confronted Quinn in the kitchen. "You told them I like stories. Did you also tell them I can't read?" "I said no such thing," he replied, helping her put away the dishes. "I mentioned you enjoyed being read to as a child, which you told me was true. The journal was Nathan's idea. But now they'll expect me to use it. What if they ask to read what I've written?" Quinn considered this. "Then we'll write in it together. Each night you tell me what happened that day, what you thought about, what you hope for, and I'll write it down. Then someday, when you can read it yourself, you'll have the story of our beginning." The idea was so unexpectedly romantic that Tabitha found herself speechless. This man, whom she'd married out of desperation, continued to surprise her with his kindness and understanding. That night, they began the journal. Sitting side by side at the kitchen table, Tabitha hesitantly shared her impressions of her new home, her fears and small triumphs, while Quinn's hand moved steadily across the page, capturing her words. "Read it back to me," she asked when he'd finished. Quinn cleared his throat and began to read, his deep voice giving weight and beauty to her simple observations. When he'd finished, Tabitha realized she was crying. "Did I get something wrong?" he asked, alarmed. She shook her head. "No, it's just hearing my thoughts that way, knowing they're preserved. No one's ever valued what I had to say before." Quinn's expression softened. "I value everything about you, Tabitha." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Quinn leaned forward slightly, then caught himself and stood abruptly. "It's late. We should get some rest." Tabitha nodded, disappointment mingling with relief. Their relationship was still too new, too fragile for what had almost happened. But for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that someday they might truly be husband and wife in every sense. As summer gave way to fall, Tabitha's confidence grew. Her reading improved steadily, though writing remained challenging. She could now recognize most words in Quinn's simple books, and the pride she felt when deciphering a new passage was indescribable. The journal became their nightly ritual. Sometimes Quinn would add his own observations, and reading these glimpses into his thoughts became Tabitha's favorite part of the exercise. She learned that he noticed the way sunlight caught in her hair, that he admired her determination, that he worried about providing well enough for her. "Why did you send for a mail-order bride?" she asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "You're handsome enough and kind. Surely there were local girls who would have had you." Quinn was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft with remembered pain. "There was someone once. Emily Washburn. We grew up together, planned to marry. Then a flash flood took her and her family when I was 22. He stared into the distance. "Afterward, I couldn't bear to court anyone here. Too many memories, too many comparisons. Thought it would be easier with someone new, someone who didn't know about Emily and me." Tabitha's heart ached for his loss. "I'm sorry. It must be hard being reminded of her." "It was at first," he admitted. "But now I find myself thinking about the present more than the past." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, understanding, possibility, perhaps even the first stirrings of love. The next day, Quinn rode to town for supplies, leaving Tabitha to tend the ranch. She was collecting eggs when a stranger appeared in the barnyard, a well-dressed man with cold eyes and an insincere smile. "Mrs. Buchanan, I presume," he called, tipping his hat. Tabitha straightened, instantly wary. "Yes, my husband isn't here at present." "That's quite all right. My name is Howard Reeves. I represent the Southwestern Land and Cattle Company." He produced a document from his coat. "I've come to discuss the purchase of your property." Anxiety bloomed in Tabitha's chest. A document she couldn't read, a business matter she didn't understand, and Quinn miles away. "My husband handles all business matters. You'll need to return when he's available." Reeves stepped closer, his smile hardening. "Perhaps I could leave this contract for you to review together." "The offer is quite generous." He extended the paper toward her, and Tabitha fought the urge to back away. Taking it would mean admitting she couldn't read it. Refusing would seem suspicious. "I'll take it," came a voice from behind them. Quinn stood at the edge of the yard, his expression thunderous. "And you can take yourself off my land, Reeves." The man's smile didn't waver. "Mr. Buchanan, I was just explaining to your charming wife that Southwestern is prepared to pay top dollar for this ranch." "Water rights alone ain't for sale," Quinn interrupted, moving to stand beside Tabitha. "Not now, not ever. Tell Donovan he can keep sending his men, but my answer won't change." Reeves shrugged, unperturbed. "Markets change, circumstances change, people change their minds." His gaze shifted to Tabitha. "Especially when they have others to consider." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Quinn's hand moved to his belt where his revolver hung. "You're trespassing." After Reeves departed, Quinn explained that Victor Donovan, owner of Southwestern, had been buying up ranches throughout the territory, often using underhanded tactics to pressure owners to sell. "He wants to control the water rights," Quinn said as they walked back to the house. "With the creek running through our property, we're standing in the way of his empire." Tabitha felt a chill despite the warm day. "Will he come back?" "Likely. But don't you worry. This land's been in my family for 20 years. My pa worked himself to death making it prosper. I won't let some land-grabbing vulture take it." That night, their journal entry was brief, neither of them wanting to commit Reeves' visit to paper. Instead, they sat closer than usual on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "I'm sorry I wasn't here when he came," Quinn said quietly. "You can't be everywhere at once." Still, the thought of him intimidating you. His jaw tightened. "I should have warned you about Donovan and his men." Tabitha hesitated, then placed her hand over his. "We're partners now, Quinn. You don't have to protect me from everything." He turned his hand to clasp hers, rough skin against smooth. "Is that what we are? Partners? What would you call it?" Quinn looked at her then, really looked at her, his gaze more intimate than any touch. "I'd call it the beginning of something I never expected to find again." That night, for the first time, he kissed her, a gentle, questioning touch of his lips to hers that left them both breathless and uncertain. When they parted to their separate bedrooms, Tabitha knew something fundamental had shifted between them. October brought cooler temperatures and the fall roundup. Quinn worked from dawn until dusk, coming home exhausted but satisfied as the cattle were counted, calves branded, and preparations made for the coming winter. Tabitha thrived in her role as rancher's wife. She put up preserves, mended winter clothes, and continued her daily lessons. She could now read simple sentences and write her name clearly. Each small victory was celebrated by Quinn with genuine pride. Their physical relationship progressed slowly, cautiously. Kisses goodnight became longer, hands began to wander, but Quinn never pressed for more, understanding that Tabitha's trust was still fragile, her confidence in herself as a woman still developing. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Quinn produced a letter. "Got this today in town. It's from my sister Nora in California." He hesitated. "Would you like to try reading it?" Tabitha took the paper nervously. The handwriting was neat, but the words looked dauntingly complex. She began slowly, stumbling over longer words but pressing on with determination. "Dear Quinn," she read haltingly, "I hope this letter finds you well. Frank and the children are thriving in San Francisco. Business is good at the store. We were surprised and delighted to hear of your marriage. Tell us more about your bride. Is she adjusting to ranch life? Do you plan to visit this Christmas? The children ask about their uncle often." She paused, looking up at Quinn with shining eyes. "I read it. I actually read it." His smile was radiant. "You sure did. Every word correct." Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed him, pouring her joy and gratitude into the contact. Quinn responded immediately, pulling her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed against her back. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Quinn rested his forehead against hers, his voice rough with emotion. "Tabitha, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Tabitha closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the feelings cascading through her. "I think I'm falling in love with you too." That night, Quinn walked her to her bedroom door as usual but lingered, clearly struggling with what to say next. Tabitha made the decision for both of them, taking his hand and leading him into her room. What followed was a tender, unhurried exploration, each giving and taking with equal measure until they lay entwined, no longer two strangers bound by a contract but partners in the truest sense. In the quiet aftermath, Quinn traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I'll write to Nora tomorrow. Tell her about my amazing wife who's smarter and braver than anyone I know." Tabitha smiled against his chest. "Tell her we'll visit in the spring. I've never seen the ocean. Whatever you want, darling. The world's opening up for you now." The next weeks were the happiest of Tabitha's life. She and Quinn settled into married life with surprising ease, their days filled with work and their nights with conversation, learning, and love. The journal entries became more personal, more heartfelt, documenting not just daily events but hopes and dreams for their future together. November brought the first frost and with it trouble. Quinn returned from town one day with a grim expression and worrying news. "Donovan's got most of the smaller ranches now," he reported as they ate supper. "The Millers sold last week, and now the Hendersons are considering it. People are scared there's been accidents, livestock gone missing, mysterious fires. But no one can prove it's Donovan." Quinn shook his head. "Man's too clever for that. uses hired guns who can't be traced back to him. What about the law? Sheriff Tate's a good man, but he's overwhelmed and underfunded, and Donovan's got friends in territorial government. He sighed heavily. We may need to consider selling Tabitha. If things get worse, no. Her response was immediate and firm. This is our home, your family's legacy. We won't be bullied off our land. Quinn studied her face, seeing the determination there. It could get dangerous. Life is dangerous, Quinn. My father was a cruel man who crushed my spirit and my mother's. I won't let another bully determine my fate. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Then we stand our ground, together. The first direct threat came 3 days later. Quinn found 2 of his best horses missing, their paddock gate mysteriously open despite being secured the night before. As he and Tabitha searched the property, they discovered a message carved into the barn door: sell now or lose more. We should report this to Sheriff Tate, Tabitha urged. Quinn nodded grimly. I'll ride into town. Stay inside until I return and keep my rifle close. After he left, Tabitha paced the house anxiously. The violation of their property, the implicit threat, left her feeling vulnerable. But beneath her fear simmered a righteous anger. This was her home now too, and she would defend it. When Quinn returned late that afternoon, his expression told her everything. Sheriff says there's little he can do without proof of who did it. So we get proof, Tabitha said firmly. We set watches, we talk to neighbors, we find witnesses. Quinn looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. When did my mail-order bride become such a fighter? When I found something worth fighting for. That night, a sudden pounding at the door startled them both from sleep. Quinn grabbed his revolver from the bedside table, motioning for Tabitha to stay behind him as they descended the stairs. Who's there? He called. It's Lee Morgan, Quinn. The Hendersons' place is on fire. We need help. The next hours passed in a blur of smoke, shouting, and desperate effort as neighboring ranchers formed a bucket line, trying to save what they could of the Hendersons' home and barn. By dawn, only smoldering ruins remained. The family had escaped with nothing but the clothes on their backs. It wasn't an accident, Tom Henderson said bitterly as his wife sobbed beside him. We told Reeves yesterday we wouldn't sell. This is the answer. The gathered ranchers exchanged grim looks. This was no longer about business, this was terrorism against their community. We need to stand together, Quinn announced. Share information, watch each other's properties, organize patrols. Heads nodded in agreement, but Tabitha noticed the fear in many eyes. Donovan's tactics were working, people were becoming too frightened to resist. Back at their ranch, Quinn and Tabitha implemented new security measures, taking turns keeping watch at night, bringing the remaining horses closer to the house, alerting each other before leaving the property. Their vigilance was rewarded a week later, when Quinn spotted 2 riders approaching the property well after midnight. Concealed in the barn with his rifle, he watched as they prepared to break into the house where Tabitha waited, also armed. That's far enough, Quinn called, stepping from the shadows. Drop your weapons. One man complied immediately. The other reached for his gun and was quickly disabled by Quinn's warning shot. Sheriff Tate arrived an hour later, roused from bed by a neighbor Quinn had sent to town. The captured men, faced with serious charges, quickly implicated Reeves as their employer, though they claimed no direct knowledge of Donovan's involvement. It's a start, Tate said, loading the prisoners into his wagon. Might be enough to get a proper investigation going, especially with the Henderson fire still fresh in everyone's minds. The following days brought cautious optimism as word spread of the arrests. Several ranchers who had been considering selling decided to hold out longer, waiting to see if Donovan's operation might finally face legal consequences. Quinn and Tabitha maintained their vigilance, but also allowed themselves to look forward again, planning for the approaching Christmas season and discussing improvements to the ranch for the coming year. Their nightly journal entries took on a more hopeful tone, though always tempered with realism about the challenges they still faced. One night, as Quinn read back what they'd written, Tabitha realized with a start that she could follow along with most of the words on the page. "I'm really learning," she said wonderingly. "I never thought I could, but I am." Quinn set down the journal and took her hands. "You can learn anything, do anything you set your mind to. Never let anyone tell you different again." December arrived with a sudden, severe cold snap. Quinn worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to water and forage despite the frozen ground. Tabitha kept the home fires burning, prepared hearty meals, and continued her studies, now working on writing full sentences independently. News from town was promising Reeves had been indicted based on the hired gun's testimony, and investigators from the territorial capital were examining Donovan's business practices. The immediate threat seemed to have receded, allowing the community to focus on holiday preparations. The Parkers invited Quinn and Tabitha to a Christmas gathering, an invitation they gladly accepted. The party was a welcome respite from months of tension, filled with good food, music, and laughter. "You two seem happy," Martha observed as she and Tabitha prepared dessert in the kitchen. "When Quinn first mentioned sending for a bride, I worried it wouldn't work out. Mail-order marriages can be such a gamble." Tabitha smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. "We've been fortunate. Quinn is a good man, and you're good for him. He was so closed off after Emily died. We all worried he'd never open his heart again. He told me about her," Tabitha said softly. "I hope she would approve of me." Martha squeezed her hand. "Oh, she would. Emily wanted Quinn to be happy above all else, and anyone with eyes can see that you make him very happy indeed." Later that evening, as they drove home under a sky brilliant with stars, Quinn seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I have something for you," he said as they reached the ranch. "An early Christmas gift." Inside, he retrieved a package from his desk drawer and handed it to her. Tabitha unwrapped it carefully to reveal a beautiful leather-bound book. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside, she found page after page of Quinn's neat handwriting their story, beginning with her arrival in Apache Junction and continuing through all the months since. "I've been copying our journal entries into this book," he explained. "Adding details, making it flow better. It's our story, Tabitha. The story I promised to write for both of us." Tears filled her eyes as she carefully turned the pages, recognizing certain passages, marveling at how he'd captured their journey together. "It's the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me," she whispered. "Thank you, Quinn." "There's one more thing," he said, turning to the book's final written page. "I'd like you to read this part yourself." Tabitha took a deep breath and began reading slowly. "I never expected to find love again. I thought that part of my life was over. Then you stepped off that train, brave and beautiful, and everything changed. Each day with you has been a gift, each night a blessing. I love you, Tabitha Buchanan, with all that I am." She looked up, tears streaming freely now. "Oh, Quinn." "There's more," he prompted gently. She returned to the page, continuing with greater difficulty as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. "The rest of the book is blank pages, waiting for us to fill them together. Will you write our future with me, not just in these pages but in life? Will you truly be my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, for all our days?" Quinn knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I know we're already married on paper, but I want to ask you properly with my whole heart. I love you, Tabitha." Will you stay with me, build a life with me, grow old with me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Quinn, I love you too." He gathered her in his arms, kissing her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have never been happier than I am right now." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of rare snow transforming the landscape. Quinn and Tabitha exchanged simple gifts, warm gloves she'd knitted for him, a delicate silver locket he'd ordered from a catalog for her. As they sat before the fire, contentment wrapped around them like a blanket, Tabitha shared news she'd been saving for this moment. "I have another gift for you," she said, taking his hand and placing it gently on her stomach. "One that won't arrive until summer." Quinn's expression transformed from confusion to wonder to overwhelming joy in the span of seconds. "A baby! We're having a baby," she nodded, her own happiness mirrored in his face. "I'm sure of it. Dr. Willis confirmed it when we were in town last week." Quinn whooped with delight, lifting her gently and spinning her around before setting her carefully back on her feet. "A family of our own," he marveled. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," she laughed. "In about 7 months this house will have one more Buchanan." That night, their journal entry was the longest yet, filled with dreams for their child, plans for the future, and expressions of love that had grown deeper than either could have imagined possible when they'd begun this journey. As winter gave way to spring, Tabitha's body changed along with the landscape. Her rounded belly became a source of wonder for Quinn, who would talk to their unborn child each night, telling stories of the ranch, his family history, and how he'd met their mother. The legal proceedings against Donovan progressed slowly but steadily. By March, several of his associates had been indicted, and while the man himself remained free, his power in the territory was significantly diminished. The ranchers of Apache Junction breathed easier, no longer living under constant threat. Tabitha's reading and writing improved dramatically with regular practice. By her 7th month of pregnancy, she could read most of Quinn's books with only occasional assistance and write simple letters to his sister Nora in California. The pride she felt in these accomplishments matched her excitement about the coming baby. "What shall we name the child?" Quinn asked one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Tabitha considered, her hand resting on her belly where their baby kicked energetically. "If it's a girl, perhaps Emily," she suggested softly. "To honor someone who was important to you." Quinn's eyes misted. "You would do that. She's part of your story, Quinn, and now part of ours." She hesitated. "Though perhaps as a middle name, I was thinking of Margaret as a first name after my mother." "Margaret Emily Buchanan," Quinn tested the name. "It's beautiful." "And if it's a boy?" "James," Quinn said without hesitation. "After my father. James Thomas Buchanan." "Perfect," Tabitha agreed, leaning into his embrace. Summer arrived with scorching heat that made Tabitha's final weeks of pregnancy especially challenging. Quinn hired a local boy to help with ranch work so he could stay closer to home, not wanting Tabitha alone as her time approached. Dr. Willis visited weekly, assuring them that despite the discomfort, both mother and child were doing well. "First babies often come late," he cautioned. "Try to be patient." Patience proved difficult as July 4th came and went with no sign of labor. Quinn grew increasingly anxious, checking on Tabitha constantly, which she found both endearing and mildly irritating. "The baby will come when it's ready," she reminded him after he'd asked for the 3rd time that morning if she felt any changes. "I know," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just hate seeing you uncomfortable." She smiled, taking his hand. "I'm carrying our child, Quinn. Any discomfort is worth it." 2 days later, in the pre-dawn hours, Tabitha woke to the unmistakable sensation of her water breaking. Labor progressed steadily throughout the day, with Martha Parker arriving to help while Quinn paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. As the sun set, James Thomas Buchanan announced his arrival with a lusty cry that brought tears to his father's eyes. When Quinn was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed with reverence, gazing in awe at his wife and son. "He's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny fingers. "You're both perfect." Tabitha, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at him. "He has your eyes." "And your determination," Quinn chuckled as the infant gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Poor Martha said she's never heard such demanding cries from a newborn." "He knows what he wants," Tabitha said proudly. "Just like his parents." The first weeks of parenthood passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and precious moments of discovery. Quinn proved to be a natural father, as comfortable cradling his son as he was handling ranch duties. He took to reading aloud each night, not just to Tabitha as he'd done before, but to little James as well. "It's never too early to develop a love of stories," he explained when Tabitha commented on this practice. "Besides, I want him to know from the beginning that in this family we value learning." By October, life had settled into a new rhythm. James was a happy, healthy baby who delighted in his father's silly voices and his mother's gentle songs. The ranch prospered, with the fall roundup yielding better results than the previous year. Most satisfying of all, Victor Donovan finally faced justice, convicted of conspiracy and fraud after months of investigation. The ranching community celebrated the news with a harvest festival that brought together families from miles around. At the festival, Tabitha found herself speaking with confidence to neighbors, no longer afraid that her educational background would be discovered or judged. Quinn watched her with pride as she chatted with Martha Parker, bouncing James on her hip. "Your wife's a remarkable woman," Nathan Parker commented, following Quinn's gaze. "Hard to believe she's the same shy gal who arrived on that train last year." "She was always remarkable," Quinn replied. "She just needed someone to believe in her as much as she believed in herself." That night, as James slept peacefully in his cradle, Quinn and Tabitha sat at the kitchen table with their journal and the leather-bound book he'd given her last Christmas. "I think it's time you wrote an entry yourself," Quinn suggested. "Your writing's strong enough now." Tabitha hesitated, then nodded, accepting the pen. Slowly but confidently, she began to write. "Today marks 1 year since I arrived in Apache Junction, a frightened woman with a secret and a suitcase. I could never have imagined the life waiting for me here, a loving husband, a beautiful son, a home worth fighting for. I have learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the determination to move forward despite it. I have learned that love doesn't require perfection, only honesty and commitment. Most importantly, I have learned that my father was wrong. I am capable of learning, of growing, of becoming more than I ever dreamed possible. With Quinn's patience and faith in me, I now read the books I once thought forever closed to me. I write my own thoughts rather than depending on others to express them. And I look forward to teaching our son that knowledge, like love, is something that grows when shared." Quinn read her words with shining eyes. "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever read." "It's the truth," Tabitha said simply. "You promised to write our story for both of us, but you've done something far more important. You've helped me write my own." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And we're just getting started. There are so many more chapters to come." As if on cue, James stirred in his cradle, letting out a small whimper that quickly became a more insistent cry. "Speaking of chapters," Tabitha laughed, rising to tend to their son, "this one demands immediate attention. Quinn followed, wrapping his arms around her as she lifted the baby. The three of them stood together in the soft lamplight, a family created from an unlikely beginning but bound now by the strongest ties of love. "I wouldn't change a word of our story," Quinn murmured against her hair. "Not a single word." Tabitha leaned back against him, their son cradled between them. "Neither would I," she replied. "It's perfect exactly as it is." 5 years later, Quinn sat on the porch swing, little Margaret Emily on his lap and James beside him, as Tabitha read aloud from their leather-bound book. Her voice was confident, her expression animated as she shared the early chapters of their life together with their children. "Is that really how you and Papa met, Mama?" James asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Every word is true," Quinn confirmed, tousling his son's sandy hair. "Your mama was the bravest woman I'd ever seen, traveling all that way to marry a stranger." "And Papa taught Mama to read and write," Margaret added, clearly having heard the story before but still enchanted by it. Tabitha smiled at her family. "He did indeed. And now, I'm teaching other grown-ups in town who never had the chance to learn." The small school she'd started 2 years earlier had become an important part of the community, offering evening classes to adults who, like her, had missed educational opportunities in their youth. "Tell about the bad men who tried to take our ranch," James requested, always drawn to the more adventurous parts of the tale. "Another time," Quinn promised. "It's getting late and you two have chores in the morning." After the children were tucked in bed, Quinn and Tabitha returned to the porch, sitting close together on the swing as they often did in the evening. "I received a letter from Nora today," Tabitha mentioned. "She's invited us to visit San Francisco next spring. Says the children are old enough to appreciate the journey now." Quinn nodded thoughtfully. "Might be good timing. The ranch is doing well, and young Ellie Morgan is reliable enough to watch things while we're gone. The children would love to see the ocean," Tabitha added. "And I admit, I'm curious about city life again, though I can't imagine living anywhere but here now." "This will always be home," Quinn agreed, pulling her closer. "But there's a whole world out there for us to explore together." They sat in companionable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The ranch around them was peaceful cattle grazing in distant fields, horses settled in their paddocks, chickens roosting in the henhouse. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tabitha asked softly. "When you sent for a mail-order bride, did you picture this life?" Quinn considered the question seriously. "I hoped for companionship, maybe eventual affection. I never dared dream of such happiness." He turned to face her fully. "What about you? When you answered my advertisement, what were you hoping for?" "Safety," she admitted. "Escape from my father's house. The chance to make my own decisions." She smiled, touching his face gently. "I never imagined finding a man who would see value in me beyond cooking and cleaning. Who would teach me to read, encourage me to teach others, support every dream I've ever had." "You've given me far more than I've given you," Quinn insisted. "A family, a purpose beyond just working the land, joy I thought was lost to me forever." Tabitha leaned forward to kiss him softly. "Then we're even," she whispered against his lips. Later that night, after adding a new entry to their ongoing chronicle, they stood together at their children's bedsides, watching them sleep. James with Quinn's strong features already emerging, Margaret with Tabitha's chestnut hair spread across her pillow. "We should write a proper book someday," Quinn suggested as they returned to their bedroom. "Our story might help others who feel alone or limited by circumstances." Tabitha considered this. "Perhaps we should. The mail-order bride who couldn't read," she suggested with a laugh. "Though that's not the most romantic title." Quinn pulled her into his arms, "How about then I'll write our story for both of us," he suggested. "Those were the first words that made you look at me with hope instead of fear. They were the first words that made me believe our marriage might become something real," she agreed. "Something meaningful. It became everything," Quinn said simply. "Everything that matters in this world." As they prepared for bed, Tabitha reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place, this life, this love. From a frightened, illiterate woman stepping off a train in a strange town to a confident wife, mother, and teacher, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. Yet it hadn't been a miracle at all, but rather the patient work of two people committed to building something together, word by word, day by day, challenge by challenge. Their story, written first by Quinn alone and now by both of them, was a testament to the power of belief, his belief in her potential, her belief in his goodness, their shared belief in the possibility of love. Outside, the desert night wrapped around their home like a protective embrace. Stars scattered across the vast sky like words on a page, telling stories of their own. Inside, two people who had once been strangers drifted to sleep in each other's arms, their shared history binding them together more securely than any marriage contract ever could. Their story continued to unfold with each passing day, no longer needing to be written down to be remembered, living instead in the love they shared, the family they'd created, and the lives they'd touched. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience had blossomed into a love story as vast and enduring as the western landscape that had brought them together.